What if the greatest thing destroying your peace is not the world around you, but your own mind? Think about it. How many times have you replayed the same painful memory over and over again? How many nights have you lost sleep because your mind refused to stop thinking? How many times have you imagined problems that never actually happened? Most people believe suffering comes from life itself, from heartbreak, rejection, loneliness, failure, or uncertainty. But according to the ancient wisdom of Lao Tzu, the deeper problem is far more dangerous. The human mind becomes addicted to suffering. It becomes addicted to overthinking, addicted to fear, addicted to emotional chaos, addicted to pain that feels familiar. Even when life becomes peaceful, the mind searches for something to worry about. It creates problems where none exist. It reopens old wounds. It imagines worst-case scenarios. And slowly, suffering becomes a habit. But what if peace has been available all along? What if the reason you cannot hear it is because your mind has become too attached to noise? In this video, we'll explore one of the deepest teachings from the Tao Te Ching and uncover why the mind secretly clings to suffering, and how Lao Tzu's wisdom can finally set you free. Most people believe suffering comes from life itself. They believe their pain is caused by difficult circumstances, toxic people, heartbreak, failure, loneliness, rejection, uncertainty, or loss. And while these experiences certainly create pain, according to the wisdom of Lao Tzu and the teachings of the Tao Te Ching, the deeper source of suffering often comes from something far more hidden. The mind itself becomes addicted to suffering. This sounds strange at first. Why would any human being become addicted to pain? Why would the mind repeatedly create anxiety, overthinking, emotional chaos, and inner conflict? Yet if you observe human behavior carefully, something becomes clear. Many people continuously return to thoughts, habits, emotions, and patterns that hurt them. They replay painful memories endlessly. They imagine worst-case scenarios constantly. They stay attached to toxic relationships, destructive habits, resentment, comparison, and fear even when these things clearly destroy their peace. The human mind often clings to suffering because suffering becomes familiar, and what is familiar feels psychologically safe, even when it is painful. Many people do not know how to exist without mental struggle. From childhood, they become conditioned to worry, compare, fear, chase validation, and criticize themselves constantly. Over time, emotional tension becomes normal. Chaos becomes identity. The mind grows so accustomed to suffering that peace itself begins feeling uncomfortable. This is one of the deepest truths Lao Tzu wanted humanity to understand. Human beings create enormous amounts of unnecessary suffering through resistance, attachment, and unconscious thinking. Think about overthinking. Most people know overthinking makes them miserable, yet they continue doing it every day. They replay conversations repeatedly. They obsess over the future. They mentally relive embarrassing moments from years ago. Even when nothing dangerous is happening in the present moment, the mind creates emotional pain internally. Why? Because the mind believes suffering creates protection. The mind thinks, if I worry enough, maybe I can prevent future pain. If I overanalyze everything, maybe I can stay safe. If I constantly prepare for disaster, maybe life cannot surprise me. But this creates psychological imprisonment. The mind becomes trapped in endless tension because it believes tension equals survival. Lao Tzu understood that the human mind suffers most when it moves too far away from the present moment. Anxiety comes from future obsession. Regret comes from attachment to the past. Comparison comes from egoic insecurity. But peace exists only here, in the present. Yet most people rarely experience the present fully because the mind constantly drags attention elsewhere. Modern society intensifies this addiction dramatically. People consume endless negativity every day through social media, news, comparison, outrage, and constant stimulation. Fear becomes addictive because emotional intensity captures attention. The modern mind becomes conditioned to chaos. Silence feels uncomfortable because silence forces people to confront themselves directly. This is why many individuals constantly seek distraction. Phones, entertainment, noise, social media scrolling, endless stimulation. These become escapes from inner stillness. Because when the distractions disappear, unresolved pain rises to the surface. Lao Tzu believed stillness reveals truth, but most people fear stillness because they are afraid of what they might discover within themselves. The addicted mind constantly seeks emotional drama. Even when life becomes peaceful externally, the mind creates new problems internally. It searches for reasons to worry. It anticipates rejection before it happens. It imagines conflict where none exists. This is why some people sabotage happiness unconsciously. Peace feels unfamiliar, so the mind returns to suffering patterns automatically. Think about toxic relationships. Many people repeatedly return to relationships that hurt them deeply. They confuse emotional intensity with love because chaos has become familiar psychologically. Healthy peace feels boring to a nervous system addicted to emotional turbulence. Or think about self-criticism. Some people attack themselves mentally every single day. Nothing they accomplish ever feels enough. The mind constantly whispers, "You should be doing more. You are falling behind. You are not good enough." This inner voice becomes so constant that people stop questioning it. They assume suffering is simply part of existence. But Lao Tzu taught something radically different. He believed suffering increases when people resist their natural state. Human beings are not born hating themselves. They are conditioned into disconnection. Nature itself demonstrates peace effortlessly. Rivers flow naturally. Trees grow patiently. Animals do not compare themselves endlessly. Yet human beings constantly move against their own inner harmony through ego, fear, attachment, and overthinking. The ego plays a major role in this addiction to suffering. The ego constantly seeks validation, superiority, control, and identity reinforcement. It compares itself endlessly against others. It takes offense easily. It clings to past wounds because pain strengthens identity. Some people become so identified with suffering that they no longer know who they are without it. Victimhood becomes identity. Pain becomes personality. And because the ego feeds on identity, it resists letting suffering go completely. This is why healing often feels uncomfortable initially. A peaceful mind feels unfamiliar to someone conditioned to chaos. Letting go of old emotional patterns can feel like losing part of oneself. The ego fears emptiness because it survives through constant mental activity. Lao Tzu understood that true peace emerges not through force, but through release. Modern people constantly try to fight their minds aggressively. They try to control every thought, suppress every emotion, and eliminate every discomfort instantly. But resistance often strengthens suffering further. The harder people fight certain thoughts emotionally, the stronger those thoughts become. Nature teaches softness instead. Water does not fight obstacles aggressively. It flows around them. Taoist wisdom encourages observation rather than constant internal warfare. A peaceful person learns how to witness thoughts without becoming completely controlled by them. This changes everything. When you stop identifying with every fearful thought, suffering weakens. When you stop replaying every painful memory endlessly, suffering weakens. When you stop comparing yourself constantly, suffering weakens. When you stop resisting uncertainty, suffering weakens. The addicted mind survives through repetition. It continuously replays emotional patterns automatically because neural pathways strengthen over time. Fear becomes habit. Anxiety becomes habit. Self-criticism becomes habit. Emotional suffering becomes deeply conditioned. But habits can change. Lao Tzu believed simplicity creates clarity because simplicity quiets the mind's endless noise. Modern life overwhelms people constantly with stimulation, pressure, comparison, and information overload. The nervous system becomes exhausted. Many individuals no longer know what inner calmness even feels like. This is why nature feels healing. A quiet forest, flowing water, rain falling softly, sunlight through trees. These experiences reconnect human beings with their natural rhythm because nature itself is not mentally addicted to suffering. Human beings are happiest when they reconnect with simplicity. Another reason the mind clings to suffering is because suffering creates familiarity and certainty. A person who expects disappointment constantly may unconsciously reject positive experiences because hope feels dangerous. If you never expect happiness, you believe you cannot be hurt as deeply. So the mind chooses emotional protection over emotional openness. This creates emotional numbness. Lao Tzu taught that softness is strength precisely because softness remains open to life. A hardened mind becomes emotionally rigid. It loses flexibility, wonder, trust, and peace. One of the clearest signs of suffering addiction is the inability to be fully present. Most people cannot sit quietly for even a few minutes without reaching for distraction. Silence feels unbearable because the restless mind constantly demands stimulation. Yet peace only becomes possible when the mind learns how to rest. Meditation appears repeatedly in spiritual traditions because meditation interrupts unconscious mental addiction. It reveals how repetitive and chaotic the mind truly is. Most thoughts are not even consciously chosen. They arise automatically through conditioning. But awareness changes the relationship with thought. Lao Tzu believed wisdom begins through observation. The moment you observe the mind clearly, you stop being completely imprisoned by it. You begin noticing how often suffering is self-created internally. How often fear comes from imagination rather than present reality. How often emotional pain comes from resistance rather than life itself. This does not mean all suffering is imaginary. Human life naturally contains pain, grief, heartbreak, uncertainty, and loss. Taoist wisdom does not deny this reality. But there is a profound difference between natural pain and psychological suffering created through mental resistance. Pain is part of life, but much suffering comes from the mind's attachment to pain. The mind reopens old wounds repeatedly through memory, fear, and resistance. It creates emotional storms around temporary experiences. And because people identify so strongly with their thoughts, they rarely realize they are feeding their own suffering unconsciously. Lao Tzu believed freedom begins when people stop clinging so tightly to mental noise. Imagine how different life becomes when you no longer believe every anxious thought automatically. Imagine letting emotions flow naturally without suppressing or obsessing over them. Imagine existing peacefully without needing constant drama, comparison, or emotional chaos. This is the freedom Taoist wisdom points toward: a quiet mind, a lighter heart, and a life no longer controlled by endless internal conflict. At the deepest level, Lao Tzu wanted people to understand that peace is already available beneath the noise. But the addicted mind cannot hear it because it remains constantly distracted by fear, ego, and suffering patterns. And perhaps the greatest tragedy of human life is this: many people search everywhere for peace, while unconsciously remaining addicted to the very suffering that keeps peace away.